I stepped into the grand foyer of the Riverside Meridian Hotel, the place where my son's engagement reception was being held. My boots clean, polished, but aged like me clicked against the marble floor, echoing louder than I intended. I had barely taken 3 steps into that glittering hall when I heard it. A woman's voice, sharp as a cold blade, slipped through the buzz of conversation. The reeking farmhand finally decided to show up. She did not shout it. She did not need to. Her words reached me with surgical precision, landing squarely in my chest. If you're listening to this story, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from. Her lips barely moved, yet her disdain spilled everywhere. And although she spoke to the woman beside her, her eyes were fixed directly on me. My breath stalled. I felt heat rise across my face, hot enough to burn. Every instinct told me to turn around, to walk back out into the night, to save what little pride I had left. I had endured harsh winters, dying livestock, droughts, and the loneliness of old age. But somehow, that single sentence cut deeper than all of them. I pivoted slightly, ready to make my escape. But then a hand gripped my forearm steady, firm, familiar. My son, Ethan. He leaned in close, his voice low enough for only me to hear. "Stay steady, Dad. Tomorrow we set things right." The way he said it, calm, resolved, almost icy, made my stomach twist. My son had always been gentle, thoughtful, the kind of man who apologized even when others wronged him. But the look in his eyes now? Hard, focused, unshakable. Something was happening here. Something bigger than a cruel comment at a fancy party. Something I had not seen coming. Before I tell you what unfolded, I need you to understand who I am, where I come from, and why those words reeking farmhand landed like a brand on my skin. Because this story is not just about humiliation. It is about truth, legacy, betrayal, and the kind of justice that arrives only when a man has been pushed too far. And I promise you, the revenge my son whispered about was nothing like what anyone in that hotel expected. My name is Henry Cole. I am 65 years old, though most days I feel older, and some days, mostly the quiet ones, I feel younger. I was born in the northern plains of Wyoming, on a patch of land so wide and open it felt like the sky itself could swallow a manhole. My father worked that land before me, and his father before him. And by the time it passed into my hands, it felt less like property and more like a living memory, every acre a reminder of who we were. I grew up in a wooden farmhouse with creaking floors and a wind that whistled through the walls on winter nights. Our family was not wealthy. We did not have designer shoes or exotic vacations. But we had warm meals, working hands, and enough faith in one another to carry us through the roughest storms. My father used to say, "A man is measured by the soil under his nails and the truth in his voice." I lived my life trying to prove him right. I married once my beloved Margaret. She had a laugh that could fix a tired soul and a way of calming storms inside me before they ever broke. We built a home, raised 2 children, and dreamed of growing old on the porch together. But dreams are fragile things. Margaret passed away from an undetected heart condition 7 years ago. One moment she was fine, the next she was gone like a candle snuffed out by a sudden wind. Those first years after losing her felt like walking through mud that reached my knees. But my children, my daughter Elaine, now living in Seattle with her growing family, and my son Ethan, my closest link to my younger years, kept me going. Especially Ethan. Ethan Cole, 33 years old, agricultural consultant, sharp as a pin, humble as a field mouse. He earned scholarships, worked the land with me on weekends, and built a name for himself advising ranchers and small farming companies. He could read soil like a doctor reads x-rays. I always told him he had a gift. When he graduated, I cried harder than I did at my own wedding. Pride does strange things to an old man. For years, it was just him and me at the ranch on weekends mending fences, checking irrigation systems, sharing soft drinks while watching the sun fall behind the hills. Margaret always said Ethan had my heart and her spirit. Maybe she was right. Then, about 2 years ago, he brought someone home. Her name was Clarissa Davenport. She was elegant, polished, carrying herself with the kind of practiced confidence you see in people raised in big cities among high expectations and louder ambitions. She came from a family with long money export businesses, old investments, connections that stretched into places I had only ever seen on television. The first time I met her at a Sunday lunch, she smiled politely, complimented the ranch, and asked questions that felt more like assessments. Not rude, just cool. Calculated. As if she were deciding whether the life my son came from was worthy of standing beside hers. Her parents, Lawrence and Marion Davenport, entered our lives not long after. I remember the first time Ethan invited me to their estate, sprawling, modern glass home perched on a hill overlooking the city. Landscaped gardens, towering hedges trimmed with machine-like precision, marble statues that probably cost more than my barn roof. Lawrence greeted me with a handshake too limp to feel honest. "Henry Cole," he said, "the man of the land. My daughter has spoken of you." But his tone said something else entirely. Something like, "I already know your kind." Marion offered me tea in a porcelain cup, so thin it looked like frost. Her questions were gentle on the surface, but probing underneath. "Have you always lived on the ranch, Mr. Cole?" "Yes, ma'am. Nearly my whole life." "How quaint," she murmured, and I swear that word quaint tasted like a backhand. Still, for my son's sake, I swallowed whatever discomfort lingered on my tongue. Ethan was in love, and love can build bridges over canyons. Or so I hoped. Months passed. Wedding plans unfolded. Clarissa seemed too enthusiastic, maybe about every decision Ethan made. She insisted her family pay for almost everything, claiming they wanted the event to represent the Davenport standard. Ethan contributed what he could, money saved from consulting gigs, honest earnings he took pride in. And then came the engagement reception. The night I walked into that hotel, hopeful, dressed in my best suit, combed hair, and boots polished until the leather gleamed, only to be called a reeking farmhand by the woman I had tried to accept as my future daughter-in-law. The shame of that moment still stung beneath my ribs. But it was the moment that set everything else in motion. Because when my son leaned in and whispered, "Tomorrow, Dad, tomorrow we make things right," I finally understood. He knew something dark, something dangerous. And whatever it was, he had been carrying it alone. Until that night. After the engagement reception wound down and most of the guests drifted out under the glittering chandelier lights, Ethan and I slipped out to the hotel parking structure where his truck was waiting. The quiet there felt like a different world, just humming lights, faint echoing footsteps, and the smell of cold concrete. He unlocked the truck, motioning for me to get in. As soon as the door shut, sealing us inside, he exhaled as if releasing a weight he had been carrying for too long. "Dad," he said, gripping the steering wheel without turning the key, "I need you to listen all the way through. No interrupting. No panicking." My heart stumbled in my chest. "Son, what's going on?" Instead of answering, he reached into the center console and pulled out his phone. He opened an audio app I'd never seen before, waveforms scrolling down the screen like heartbeats frozen in time. Dozens of files. A whole list of dates. "What's all that?" I asked. "Conversations," he whispered. "Recordings. Proof." I blinked at him. "Proof of what?" He hesitated, his jaw tightening the way it did whenever he struggled with something heavy. "Dad, Clarissa never loved me. She never wanted a life with me. She wanted the ranch." My stomach twisted painfully. "Ethan, don't say something you'll regret, dash." He cut me off, his voice sharp. "No, Dad. I'm not guessing. I'm not assuming. I heard it. I have everything recorded." He tapped one of the files. A voice filled the cab, familiar one. Clarissa's. Except it wasn't the sweet, polite tone she used at family dinners. This voice was colder, sharper, stripped of any softness. "It's almost done," she said. "Once the wedding is over, Ethan will convince his father to shift the deed. He idolizes that old man. He'll do whatever he asks." Another voice, Marion, her mother, cut in. "And if the old man refuses? Then we follow plan 2, Clarissa replied casually. "Ethan already gave me access to his accounts. Once we're married, it's community property. We consolidate it all, then find a way to push his father out of decision-making." My hand shook. My throat dried out. "Turn it off," I whispered. "There's more," Ethan said softly, but firmly. He played a second recording. This time, Lawrence's deep voice rolled through the cab like thunder. The land is everything. That ranch sits right in the expansion zone for the state development project. In a few years, it'll be worth 10 times what Cole thinks it is. We need that deed. Clarissa, make sure you secure it. I know, Dad, she replied. That's why I agreed to marry him. Do you think I enjoy spending weekends on that dusty land, pretending I adore his widower father? Please. My pulse hammered in my ears. They weren't just opportunists. They weren't just greedy. They were calculated. Predatory. Ethan moved to the next file. This one, he said, is what confirmed everything for me. He played it. It was Clarissa again, talking to someone on the phone. I swear, this whole charade will be over in a week. I'm Mary the fool. We isolate his father, and within months the ranch is ours. My dad already found interested buyers. We're talking serious money here. Then, laughing lightly, honestly, I can't believe how easy it is to manipulate him. Silence. Then Ethan spoke, voice trembling with anger he had been trying to hold back. I confronted her in my mind 100 times, he said, but I needed proof. So I kept digging. I used a small audio device, and once the hidden camera. A camera? I breathed. Yes, they never suspected a thing. And Dad. He looked at me with eyes that carried both fury and heartbreak. It wasn't just about the money. They talked about you. He pulled up a short clip. Clarissa's voice came through again, this time filled with the same venom she had used earlier that evening. I can't stand that man. The whole place smells like old hay and stubbornness. But after the wedding, we'll make sure Ethan distances himself. Maybe put the father in some facility so he's not in the way. The air left my lungs. Not just the ranch. Not just my son. They wanted to erase me. Dad, Ethan murmured, placing a hand on my shoulder. I'm sorry you had to hear this. I've been carrying it for weeks. I didn't want to break your heart unless I was absolutely certain. I swallowed hard, voice barely steady. So what now? That's why I whispered what I did tonight, he said. Tomorrow, at the wedding rehearsal before anyone can exchange vows, they're going to see everything. Every word, every plan, every recording. I've got an audio-visual specialist helping me edit and prepare the proof. The venue manager thinks it's a tribute video for Clarissa. And you're sure about this? I asked quietly. It'll be a storm, Ethan. A real one. His voice didn't waver. I'd rather face a storm than spend a lifetime chained to a lie. And I will not let them take your legacy, Dad. Not 1 inch of it. My eyes stung not from sadness, but from pride so fierce it nearly broke me. He had Margaret's courage. He had my stubborn spine. He had become a man I could never have imagined, exactly the man I hoped he'd be. Tell me what you need from me, I said. He exhaled relief, determination, something deeper mixed in. Tomorrow, he said, no matter what happens, you stay calm. Stay seated. Trust me, because everything will unfold exactly as planned. I nodded slowly, but inside I felt a storm rising. And somewhere deep in my bones, I knew the next day would either save our family or shatter it forever. I did not sleep that night. I sat by the hotel window, staring out at the city lights shimmering like restless fireflies, replaying Clarissa's words over and over, each one cutting deeper than the last. Her laugh, that cold, careless laugh, gnawed at my chest. For the first time in many years, I felt something I thought I had buried with Margaret Pure, burning anger. When dawn finally crept up behind the mountains, I felt older than ever. Just after sunrise, Ethan called me. Dad, he said, come to my apartment. There's someone you need to meet. When I arrived, his place looked nothing like it usually did. Typically, it was neat, simple, just books, plants, and a few framed photos of family and landscapes. But this morning, the dining table was covered in cables, speakers, a laptop with multiple screens open, and a projector that looked like something borrowed from a film studio. Standing beside, it was a man in his late 30s or early 40s. He wore jeans, a faded blue hoodie, wire-rimmed glasses, and had an energy that buzzed like he ran on caffeine and purpose. Dad, Ethan said, this is Noah. Noah Pierce. He's an audio-visual technician, one of the best I know. Noah gave me a warm nod. Mr. Cole, it's an honor. Ethan filled me in on, well, the short version. I'm here to help you two pull off something clean, professional, and impossible for the Davenports to wriggle out of. I shook his hand, still absorbing the surreal nature of it all. Nice to meet you, I managed. Ethan gestured to the laptop. We've compiled everything: audio files, hidden camera footage, even text messages. Noah is helping me stitch it together into a coherent sequence. Noah scratched his beard. Think of it like a documentary highlight reel. Except instead of celebrating people, we're revealing the truth they work very hard to hide. He clicked play on the laptop. A meticulously edited montage began. Clarissa speaking with icy precision, her mother advising manipulation, her father discussing property values and profit margins. Subtitles flowed across the screen, crisp and clear, leaving no room for misinterpretation. Noah paused the video. This is the opener. It sets the tone. Ethan added, then it transitions into the phone call, where Clarissa calls me an easy mark. After that, we show the forged documents and the down payment transfers Noah traced and enhanced visually. My jaw tightened. They're going to deny everything. Let them, Noah said calmly. This isn't just evidence. It's irrefutable storytelling. A jury could follow this. Tomorrow, before the vows, Ethan said, this plays on the ceremony screen. The venue manager thinks it's a tribute video. I paid him extra to schedule the cues exactly as we want. You're sure they have no idea? I asked. Positive, Ethan replied. Clarissa texted me this morning saying she's excited for her perfect day. The way he imitated her voice, light, brittle, fake, made my stomach twist again. Noah chimed in, we'll be at the venue early. I'll check the equipment, calibrate the screen, and make sure the audio hits the whole hall evenly. The moment Ethan gives the signal, the truth comes alive. I breathed out shakily. And what do you need from me? Ethan walked over, rested a hand on my shoulder. Just sit in the front row, Dad. No matter how hard this gets to watch, no matter what they say, stay calm. Stay grounded. This is justice, not vengeance. Justice. It had been a long time since that word meant something personal. Noah packed up a few cables. Also, Mr. Cole, if they argue this was manipulated, don't worry. I prepared a side panel that shows unedited timestamps for the raw recordings. It plays after the clips. It's airtight. I nodded slowly. Thank you, both of you. I can't believe this is happening. Ethan gave a faint smile, tired, but resolute. Neither can I, but we can't let them bury what's real. We spent another hour examining the sequence, adjusting transitions, ensuring nothing could be misread or misinterpreted. At one point, Noah added a simple title card at the beginning in clean white letters against a black background. Seeing those words felt like a weight finally having a name solid, undeniable. When everything was ready, we drove to the ceremony venue, a sprawling countryside hall with tall windows and a decorative archway already draped with flowers for the rehearsal. The staff were busy polishing glasses, tuning the sound system, and setting up the seating rows. Noah immediately began unloading equipment, the venue manager waving him toward the tech booth. Your son told me you're preparing something special, the manager said with a friendly grin. A surprise for the bride? Ethan forced a polite smile. Something like that. If only the man knew how explosively literal that statement was. Noah positioned the projector behind the altar, testing alignment, while Ethan pointed out the placement on the screen. The entire area glowed with soft light as test images flickered across the white fabric, including one moment where Clarissa's frozen face appeared briefly before Noah quickly switched it off. Careful, Ethan whispered. If anyone sees that, it ruins everything. Don't worry, Noah replied. I'm stealthy when needed. For the next 2 hours, they tested angles, audio levels transitions. I watched quietly from the front pew, hands clasped, heart pounding despite the calm around me. I imagined Margaret sitting beside me, giving me that reassuring smile she always wore when life threw storms our way. "Hold steady, Henry," she might have said. "Truth has its own strength." I want to believe that. When we finally left the venue, Ethan looked at me with a mixture of exhaustion and resolve. "Tomorrow," he said softly, "will change everything. For them. For us. For the better," I said, though my voice trembled slightly. The wind brushed past us, carrying the scent of pine and distant rain. And for the first time since Clarissa's insult the night before, I felt something steady growing inside me. Not fear, not anger, something stronger. Righteous certainty. Tomorrow, truth would walk into that ceremony before any bride ever did. The morning of the wedding felt strangely calm, almost deceptive. The sky over the countryside hall stretched wide and blue, not a cloud in sight, as if the world itself did not know a storm was waiting inside the walls of that pristine venue. I wore the same charcoal suit I had used for Elaine's wedding 3 years earlier. Margaret had chosen it for me back then, insisting it brought out the color in my eyes. I remembered standing before the mirror at that time, her fixing my collar and teasing me that I still cleaned up well for a man who lived among hay bales. Her memory tugged gently at me as I straightened the jacket again. "I hope you're watching over us today," I whispered. When I arrived at the venue, the first thing I noticed was the giant projection screen behind the altar, smooth, white, and innocent-looking, almost ghost-like in the soft morning light. Only Ethan and I knew it was not a decoration, but a quiet blade waiting to fall. Noah was already on site, tightening cables and adjusting the last sound checks. He flashed me a quick, steady thumbs up. "All systems ready," he mouthed silently. My heartbeat thumped once loud, deliberate. Guests began arriving soon after, dressed in colors and fabrics almost too bright for a day that would soon darken. I watched from the front row. Ethan had instructed Noah and me to sit in predetermined spots. He at the altar, me near enough to witness everything without drawing attention. Ethan greeted people with a practiced smile. No one suspected a thing. Clarissa's side of the family arrived like a polished wave-high heels clicking, silk dresses shimmering, men with cuff links that glinted in the light. They carried themselves like royalty walking into a castle they owned. Marion led the parade, her nose slightly lifted, eyes scanning every detail as though raiding the venue. Lawrence followed, shoulders squared, lips tight in that thin line of superiority he always wore. When his gaze landed on me, it flickered with something like smugness or entitlement. He nodded as if granting permission for me to breathe in the same room. I returned a nod, but nothing more. My pulse quickened when Clarissa's bridesmaids began drifting in, whispering, giggling, admiring decorations. They had no idea they were prelude to an explosion. Their laughter echoed around the hall like a warning. Guests filled the rows steadily. Ethan's friends, engineers, farm consultants, neighbors who had known him since childhood sat behind me. They waved, smiled genuinely, unaware of the storm under the polished surface. I smiled back, but I felt like I was carrying a stone beneath my ribs. The empty seat beside me where Margaret should have been felt heavier today than it had in years. I whispered to myself, "Wish you were here, Maggie. You would know what to say." The ceremony musicians started tuning their instruments. Violins hummed softly. A keyboardist struck a few mellow chords. The hall glowed with pale gold from the early afternoon light streaming through the windows. Everything looked perfect, exactly like Clarissa imagined, exactly like Ethan planned, but not for the reason she believed. I glanced toward him at the altar. To the untrained eye, he looked like a groom nervous in a natural, expected way hands clasped, shoulders slightly tense, jaw set in concentration. But I recognized the deeper current in his demeanor. He was composed, yes, but beneath it lay a quiet fury, a sharpened resolve that I had seen only once before when his mother died, and he swore he would take care of me no matter what. He was ready. The hum of conversation faded when the venue staff signaled for everyone to rise. The wooden doors at the end of the aisle shut, then reopened slowly. Soft music swelled, and there she was, Clarissa Davenport, in a gown that shimmered like frost under morning light. Her veil draped delicately down her shoulders. Diamonds small, but numerous lined the bodice, catching every movement she made. To the crowd, she looked like the picture of elegance, the embodiment of grace. But I saw something else behind the veil, a glint of triumph, a quiet smirk she tried to hide, as though certain she was stepping into a life she believed she had already secured. Her father walked proudly beside her, as though escorting royalty to a throne. Guests whispered in awe. Marian dabbed her eyes delicately with a silk handkerchief. I felt nothing, no warmth, no admiration, just the bitter reminder of the words she had whispered the night before. The reeking farmhand finally decided to show up. I sat still, just as Ethan had instructed, even though my chest tightened painfully with every step she took. When her eyes briefly flicked toward me, I could not tell whether she was looking through me or merely evaluating me again, like checking if a stain remained visible on a shirt she intended to throw out. She reached the altar. Lawrence placed her hand in Ethan's, patting his shoulder like someone handing over a business asset rather than a daughter. Then he walked away, returning to his seat beside Marian, chest puffed, chin high. The priest took his place, clearing his throat. The ceremony began with the typical formalities, welcoming the guests, speaking about commitment, partnership, love, words that rang hollow, floating through a hall that would soon echo with something far heavier than vows. I glanced back once and saw Noah in the tech booth. He stood behind the tinted window, one hand hovering near the keyboard, waiting for Ethan's subtle cue. Ethan's eyes flicked briefly toward him. A near imperceptible nod. My breath caught. This was it. Clarissa turned toward Ethan lovingly, or at least pretending to. Ethan looked back at her with such stillness that it made the hairs on my arms rise. Then the priest spoke the line we had been waiting for. Ethan Cole, do you take Dash? Ethan raised a hand gently. Before we continue, Father, he said, voice steady. There's something everyone here deserves to see. A ripple moved through the guests. Marian stiffened. Lawrence's eyebrows shot up. Clarissa's smile froze. What are you doing? She whispered sharply. But Ethan wasn't looking at her anymore. He looked at Noah, and Noah pressed the key. The screen behind the altar came alive. The hall dimmed automatically as the projector activated. Guests murmured, turning in their seats, confused but curious. A title card appeared in crisp white letters. My heart slammed against my chest. Lawrence shot up from his seat immediately. Turn that off. This is inappropriate. But it was too late. Clarissa's recorded voice echoed through the hall, cold and clear. It's almost done. Once the wedding is over, Ethan will convince his father to shift the deed. Gasps erupted. The storm had begun, and there was no stopping it now. Clarissa froze at the altar as her own voice spilled across the hall, echoing, undeniable, merciless. Every syllable floated through the air like a shard of ice, slicing through the perfect picture she had crafted. It's almost done. Once the wedding is over, Ethan will convince his father to shift the deed. Gasps spread across the hall like a wildfire. Some of her own family members looked at her in shock. Others leaned in with widened eyes, as though trying to confirm whether the voice they heard truly belonged to her. But it was unmistakable. It was her. The veil of charm and elegance ripped clean off. No, Clarissa whispered, eyes darting wildly. This is doctored. It has to be. But the next recording began immediately. This time, Marion's voice. And if he refuses to sign, then we push Ethan to take control. He's soft enough to manipulate. Then Clarissa again. He'll fold. He worships that old man. If he thinks it protects him, he'll talk him into anything. A horrified murmur rolled across the hall. My throat tightened painfully, but I stayed still exactly as Ethan had instructed. My hands shook slightly, clasped together in my lap, but my face remained calm. The Davenport family, however, unraveled instantly. Marion clutched her chest. Turn it off. This is private. This is illegal. Lawrence shot up, voice booming. Shut down that screen. Now. He stormed toward the tech booth, but two of the venue staff blocked the aisle unknowingly, slowing him down. Noah, safely behind the booth door which he had discreetly locked, remained focused, tapping through the sequence flawlessly. Ethan didn't move. He stood firm at the altar, his face expressionless. The next clip began, this one filmed from the hidden camera. Clarissa, sitting casually in her parents' lavish living room, swirling wine in a glass. Yes, the ranch will be worth 10 times more once the development project starts. Dad just needs the deed, and then we'll move the old man out. Maybe send him to a home near Casper or something. He won't matter. A wave of outrage rippled through the crowd. Someone from Ethan's side shouted, "Unbelievable." Another voice, one of Ethan's older colleagues, muttered, "That's vile." Clarissa's legs wobbled. She clutched the bouquet as if it were the only thing anchoring her to the earth. This is a lie," she stammered. "Ethan, tell them I didn't say that." But Ethan didn't look at her. He only looked at the screen. The forged property documents filled the projection next, each page zooming in with Noah's precise edits, the Davenport signatures, the fabricated notarization, the projected profits highlighted in bright red. Guests leaned forward involuntarily, drawn in by the clarity of the evidence. A woman behind me whispered, "My God, they planned everything." Another murmured, "To sell the land behind his back? That's criminal." Lawrence lost all composure. "This is character assassination," he roared. "You think this will stand up in court? This is dash." The screen shifted again. Bank transfers, dates, amounts, connections to the development company, all laid bare. The hall went deathly quiet. Even the musicians had stopped playing, their hands frozen midair. Clarissa's posture collapsed, as if the gown itself suddenly weighed hundreds of pounds. Tears streaked through her makeup, turning it into dark rivulets down her cheeks. She stumbled toward Ethan, voice fractured. Please, Ethan, listen to me. I was under pressure. You don't understand. This isn't the whole story." But Ethan stepped back. "No," he said quietly. "This is the real story, the one I ignored for too long." Clarissa sank to her knees, bouquet tumbling from her hands and scattering petals across the polished floor. Before anyone could move, a man stood up from the second row on the Davenport side. Tall, serious, clean-shaven, wearing a dark suit that wasn't flashy like the others, more official, more rigid. He raised a hand. "Henry Cole." I blinked. "Yes. My name is Samuel Hart. I'm with the state prosecutor's office." A hush dropped over the hall like a curtain. Marion's face drained of all color. Lawrence froze mid-step. Clarissa's sobs turned into a quiet, strangled silence. Samuel continued, voice firm. "I need to speak with you and your son after the ceremony. But more importantly, what I see here today constitutes clear evidence of conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted property theft, document forgery, and potentially financial misconduct." Lawrence sputtered. "You don't have jurisdiction here." Samuel turned to him, eyes cold. "Sir, based on what has just been publicly displayed, I am well within my authority to request that you, your wife, and your daughter accompany me for questioning." Marion shrieked, "Absolutely not. We are the victims here." Samuel raised an eyebrow. "Victims of what? Your own words." The hall rippled with uneasy murmurs. Ethan stepped forward now, not angry, not shaking, just calm in a way only a man who knows the truth stands calm. "Mr. Hart," Ethan said gently, "we'll cooperate fully. Everything you saw is authenticated. We have raw files and expert verification." Samuel nodded. "Then this investigation begins immediately." When he pulled out his phone to call backup, Lawrence lunged for the tech booth again, but several guests intercepted him. "Stop this nonsense," Lawrence growled. "This is all Dash." A woman's voice cut him off sharply. "Enough, Lawrence." It was Clarissa's, and an older woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes blazing with disappointment. "I told you," she said, shaking her head. "Your greed would ruin this family." Lawrence glared, but he had lost his audience. The entire hall was turning against him. Marion tried to pull Clarissa to her feet, but Clarissa stayed kneeling, trembling, mascara smeared like charcoal down her face. "Mom," she whispered, "please, please make it stop." But nothing could stop what had already begun. Police officers arrived within minutes, 3 uniformed officers walking briskly into the hall. Samuel met them halfway, speaking quietly before gesturing toward the Davenports. One officer approached Lawrence. "Sir, we need you to accompany us for questioning. This is a farce." Lawrence snapped, but he did not resist. He couldn't. All his bravado had drained out of him like water through cracks. Another officer guided Marion, who sobbed loudly into a trembling hand. Clarissa didn't move until the last officer touched her shoulder gently. "Ma'am, please stand." She rose unsteadily, her gown dragging like a heavy shadow behind her. Before she was escorted away, she turned one last time toward Ethan. Her voice was barely audible. Did you ever love me?" Ethan met her eyes calm, resolute, and heartbreakingly sincere. "The woman I thought you were? Yes. The woman you really are? No." Clarissa collapsed into tears again as the officers led her out. Not one person applauded. Not one person gloated. The room was too stunned, too shaken by what had unfurled. Only silence remained. Silence and truth. The wedding was over before it had ever begun. The moment the police escorted the Davenports out of the hall, the atmosphere shifted into something I had never experienced before. A wedding filled with flowers, music, and carefully arranged dreams had transformed into a battlefield of truth and shock. Guests sat frozen for several seconds after the doors closed behind the officers, as though waiting to see if something else might explode. Eventually, whispers began to unfurl like wind through tall grass. "I can't believe what we just saw. That poor man. Ethan must be devastated. Imagine planning all that just to cheat someone's father. Unthinkable." I stayed in my seat, hands clasped tightly together, feeling a mixture of exhaustion and numbness. My mind kept replaying Clarissa's voice, calling me irrelevant, disposable. But strangely, I felt less broken now than I had the night before. Truth has a way of bracing a man when lies fall apart. Ethan slowly descended the altar steps. His friends gathered around him almost instantly, some patting his back, some embracing him, others simply standing there offering silent support. One of them, a tall young man named Carter, shook his head in disbelief. "Ethan, that was brutal, but necessary." Another friend, Lila, hugged him tightly. "I'm proud of you. You saved yourself and your dad." I felt those words strike deeply. Saved yourself and your dad. It hit me how close we had come to losing everything my family had built over 3 generations. My daughter, Elaine, hurried into the hall not long after, breathless and wide-eyed. She must have driven like her life depended on it when she heard the news. Dad, she cried, rushing to me. Are you all right? I stood slowly, feeling older than I had in years, but steadier too. I hugged her firmly. I'm all right, sweetheart. She pulled back, wiping tears from her cheeks. I saw some of the recordings online already. People who were here are posting snippets. Dad, what they planned, how could anyone do that? It wasn't just greed, I said quietly. It was entitlement. The belief that they could take whatever they wanted because they thought we were beneath them. Ethan walked toward us then, his shoulders slightly slumped, his eyes carrying the weight of a man who had loved a lie. Elaine hugged him, whispering, I'm so sorry, little brother. He didn't cry, but grief was written in the lines of his face, the grief of losing the version of Clarissa he had convinced himself was real. He looked at me. Dad, can we just go somewhere quiet? Before I could answer, the venue manager approached cautiously, twisting his hands together. Mr. Cole, Ethan, I'm not sure what we're supposed to do right now. The food is ready, the musicians are here, and people aren't sure whether to stay or leave. Ethan took a slow breath. Let whoever wants to stay, stay, he said. Let the food be served. We won't let the day be wasted. The manager blinked at him. Sir, after everything that happened, are you sure? Ethan forced a small smile, tired but genuine. Yes, a celebration doesn't have to be for a marriage. Today is about truth, and truth is worth honoring. I felt my throat tighten with pride. So the staff hesitated for a beat, then nodded and began directing guests toward the reception area. It was surreal, like walking into a dream where the world had flipped sideways. Tables still adorned with centerpieces, candles still lit, a band still waiting for its cue. Everyone spoke in hushed tones, as though attending a wake rather than a celebration. But slowly the room softened. People approached us, neighbors from my town, colleagues of Ethan's, even distant relatives of the Davenports who had no idea what had been happening behind closed doors. Mr. Cole, I'm so sorry, one older man said, shaking my hand. None of us knew. I've known Lawrence for years, but I never imagined. A young woman on the Davenport side approached Ethan nervously. We had no idea, she whispered. Clarissa always chased prestige, but this? I'm so sorry for what they planned. I nodded at each person who came to us, but my eyes stayed mostly on Ethan. He spoke politely, gave short answers, but his mind was somewhere else far away from the crowded room. The band began to play soft, slow instrumental music, nothing celebratory, just something to ease the tension. Plates of food were served. Guests formed small knots of conversation, still glancing at the empty spots where the Davenports had sat minutes earlier. For the first time in hours, I found myself able to breathe. Later, when the crowd thinned slightly, Ethan and I stepped outside to the quiet porch of the venue. The late afternoon sun lay low across the horizon, casting orange light over the fields nearby. The porch creaked beneath us. Ethan leaned against the railing, arms folded tightly. Dad, I'm sorry. For what? I asked gently. For putting you in this position. For letting them get close. For not seeing through her sooner. You're not to blame for trusting someone you cared about, I said softly. Trust isn't a weakness, son. But learning when to break it, that's a strength. He closed his eyes, exhaling shakily. I feel like a fool. You're not a fool. I placed a hand on his shoulder. You saw the truth. You faced it. And today, you protected our family. He swallowed hard. Still hurts. That means your heart works, I said. It means you're human. We stood there quietly for a while, listening to the distant hum of the band inside, the muted conversations, the wind brushing through tall grass. Then he said, Mr. Hart, the prosecutor wants us to meet him this week. He said the Davenports may face multiple charges. He wants formal statements. I nodded. We'll give them. And Dad, Ethan hesitated, voice softer now. We're going to have to go through documents, interviews, cross-checks. It's going to be messy. I nodded again. I've lived through storms, son. This one we'll weather together. He looked out toward the horizon, where the last sliver of sunlight burned like a promise. We're going to be all right, Dad, he said finally. I believed him. I believed him wholeheartedly. 2 days after the shattered wedding that never was, Ethan and I drove to the state prosecutor's building, a gray stone structure that looked as though it had been standing since before either of us were born. Its tall windows reflected the muted morning sky, and the air outside carried a cold, metallic bite. Inside, the hallways seemed too quiet, as if every conversation was swallowed by the walls before it could echo. The floors smelled faintly of lemon polish, and the hum of printers and murmuring voices drifted from nearby offices. Samuel Hart met us at the door of his office, wearing a crisp suit and an expression that mixed professionalism with something like respect. "Mr. Cole, Ethan," he greeted. "Come in. We have much to discuss." His office was neat and methodical, law books aligned in perfect order, certificates framed on the wall, a heavy oak desk covered with folders and sticky notes. But what caught my eye were the 3 large monitors displaying charts, audio spectrums, and scanned documents. Evidence hours laid out plainly in the glow of the screens. We sat down. Samuel opened a folder thick enough to make my stomach clench. "These," he said, tapping the covers, "are your recordings, transcripts, and the documents Ethan photographed at the Davenport residence. I've reviewed them all." He leaned back slightly. "This is one of the clearest cases of coordinated property fraud I've seen in years." Hearing it stated so plainly felt surreal, as if a stranger's life were being described instead of mine. Ethan shifted uneasily in his chair. "Is it strong enough to move forward without doubt?" Samuel nodded. "More than strong. The recordings show explicit intent. The documents are not only forged, they show deliberate planning. But there's more." He turned to one of the monitors and clicked a file. Images popped up, copies of bank statements, business contracts, tax filings. We dove deeper into Lawrence Davenport's financial history, Samuel continued. "What we found is concerning. Over the past decade, he has been sued several times by business partners. Accusations of unethical asset transfers, breach of contract, and questionable accounting practices." I raised my eyebrows. "How did all that stay hidden?" Samuel gave a thin smile. "People with resources often settle things quietly. Most of his cases never reached a courtroom, but the pattern is undeniable." He clicked again. Another folder opened, filled with records. "This," he said, "concerns Marion Davenport." Ethan tensed. I felt my breath catch. "Her debt is extensive," Samuel explained. "Multiple maxed-out credit accounts, several overdue personal loans, and a handful of high-interest lines of credit she attempted to refinance unsuccessfully." He paused, letting his words sink in. "The Davenports portray themselves as a family of means, but in truth, they're drowning financially. Your ranch was their lifeline, a way to rise from their sinking state." I felt heat rise in my chest. So this wasn't just greed, it was desperation. Desperation, Samuel confirmed, mixed with entitlement. A dangerous combination. He clicked over to yet another tab. "And then," he continued, "there's Clarissa." A photograph of her appeared on the screen, one I hadn't seen before. Simpler clothing, no jewelry, looking younger. "We interviewed an individual from Chicago," Samuel said. "A man to whom Clarissa was previously engaged." Ethan stiffened. "She told me she had only one serious relationship before me." "She omitted details," Samuel replied. "This man claims that only months into their engagement, the Davenport family began pressing him for access to financial records of his family company. He declined. Shortly after, Clarissa broke off the engagement abruptly. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. It's a pattern, Samuel said. We now have reason to believe your case is one of several similar attempts, some caught early, others unclear. Ethan rubbed his forehead. I can't believe I didn't see it. It's not your fault, Samuel said gently. People like this thrive on trust. They wrap their intentions in charm and polish. Many victims don't realize anything is wrong until it's too late. My chest tightened. Victims. We were victims. It felt strange to hear myself categorized that way, but I could not deny the truth of it. Samuel slid a set of papers across the table toward us. Now, here's what comes next. Ethan and I leaned in. We need formal statements from both of you, Samuel explained. We will also involve a forensic audio team who will verify every recording. After that, we issue subpoenas for the Davenports' financial records. Ethan frowned. Do you expect them to fight it? Oh, yes, Samuel replied. Lawrence will throw every lawyer he can afford or pretend he can afford into this fight. But the evidence is solid. If anything, their resistance will only strengthen the suspicion surrounding them. I swallowed. And the charges? Samuel folded his hands. At this stage, we anticipate conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted theft of property, forgery of legal documents, breach of financial trust, and potentially tax-related charges once we finish reviewing their records. Even said calmly, those words hit like stones tumbling down a canyon wall. Ethan exhaled slowly. It's going to be ugly, isn't it? Very, Samuel replied honestly. But you have truth on your side. You have evidence. The law is not blind. Here it sees intent, deception, manipulation. He paused before adding, and I can assure you, many people have been waiting for an opportunity to investigate the Davenports' dealings. You opened the door. We spent the next 3 hours giving detailed statements. I spoke about the ranch, the generations of work poured into it, my first impressions of Clarissa and her family, and the humiliation of the engagement dinner. Ethan gave longer, more technical testimony, how he gathered the recordings, how he realized he was being manipulated, how Clarissa asked for his account access, and how he discovered the forged documents hidden in Lawrence's study. Samuel listened closely, taking notes with precision. When we finally finished, he stood and extended his hand. Mr. Cole, Ethan, I know this is difficult, but justice doesn't unfold in silence. It unfolds because people like you refuse to be intimidated. As we left the office, walking through the dim hallway back toward the entrance, Ethan seemed lost in thought. What is it, son? I asked. He stared at the floor for a moment before saying quietly, I keep thinking about who I thought she was, and how much of that was just me wanting to believe. I rested a hand on his shoulder. Lies can be powerful, Ethan, but the truth once it comes is stronger. Hurts more, too. He gave a faint, sad smile. Yeah, it does. When we stepped outside, the sun was beginning to break through a blanket of clouds, pale gold light spreading across the courthouse steps. For a moment, I felt Maggie with me again. Not as a memory, but as a presence, quiet, steady, reminding me of the values she had cherished. Honesty, loyalty, integrity. As Ethan and I walked toward the truck, I realized something profound. The Davenports had tried to steal our land. But even worse, they had tried to steal our peace. Now, though, with truth laid bare and justice beginning its march, a new resolve settled in my bones. They might have started this, but we would finish it together. A few days after our meeting with Samuel, the story had already rippled far beyond our ranch and the ruined wedding. Word traveled faster than I ever imagined. People who had been at the ceremony shared videos online, and soon enough, the Davenport name began appearing in local news articles, then regional ones. Ethan and I kept mostly to the ranch. It felt safer there, steadier. The land does that for a man. Dur has a way of grounding your mind when chaos threatens to blow it apart. But everything changed again one quiet afternoon when an unfamiliar car rolled down our long gravel drive, a sleek silver sedan that raised a thin plume of dust behind it. I was repairing a fence panel when the door opened and a woman stepped out. She appeared to be in her early 30s, dressed in business casual clothes, her hair tied back neatly. Something about her eyes, a blend of resolve and fragility, told me she wasn't there with ill intentions. "Mr. Cole?" she asked, walking toward me with hesitance wrapped in determination. "Yes, ma'am," I replied. "Can I help you?" "My name is Janine." Janine Porter. She swallowed hard, as if saying her own name cost her something. "I heard about what happened at the ceremony. I watched the video, and I need to speak with your son." Ethan must have heard the car, because he came jogging from the barn, wiping dirt from his hands. "Yes?" he asked gently. "I was once involved with someone in the Davenport family," Janine said. "Not Clarissa directly, but her older cousin, Mitchell. It was years ago. I broke it off because they did to me what they tried to do to you." Ethan and I exchanged a glance. She continued, voice shaking slightly. "They pushed questions about my parents' property, our financial assets, the business my father owned. At first, it felt like curiosity, but then it became pressure. Mitchell said he needed access to certain accounts to prepare for our future together. When I refused, the entire family turned cold. Marion even told me, politely but pointedly, that I was not fitting enough for what they envisioned. When I left, they threatened to smear my name." Her hands trembled. "I didn't have recordings like you," she said. "So I just stayed quiet. But now that all this has come to light, I want to testify. I want to stand up to them." Ethan nodded slowly, deeply moved. "Thank you, Janine. Truly, Samuel Hart will want to speak with you." Janine exhaled shakily, relief flickering across her face. "I'm tired of being silent," she said. "People like them, if no one stops them, they keep hurting decent folks." After she left, Ethan and I sat on the porch, letting her words settle. "That makes 3, he murmured. "3 what?" I asked. "3 people who have reached out since the wedding video spread," he explained. "Samuel called earlier. There was a businessman from Cheyenne, and an older woman from Colorado whose son dated another Davenport cousin. Similar patterns, similar pressure, same entitlement. Seems the rot runs deeper than we thought," I said quietly. Ethan nodded. "Their whole system looks like it's built on preying on people they think won't fight back." "Not anymore," I murmured. But our storm was far from over. Later that evening, Samuel called. "Henry, Ethan," he said, his tone more urgent this time. "The Davenports have hired a legal team out of New York, one of the most aggressive firms in the region." I felt my pulse quicken. "What does that mean for us?" "It means," Samuel replied, "they will attempt to discredit you. They will question the legality of the recordings. They will paint Ethan as a spurned lover staging revenge. And they will argue that your family fabricated evidence to destroy a wealthy one." My throat tightened. "Fabricated? How can they say that with everything we have?" Samuel sighed. "People defend themselves with whatever weapons they have. And the Davenports have lawyers who specialize in muddying the water." "What do we do?" Ethan asked. "You prepare," Samuel replied firmly. "And you trust that the truth is on your side. I will handle their legal maneuvers. But you must stay consistent, calm, and clear." After the call, silence lingered around us like fog. Ethan rubbed his forehead. "This is going to get ugly, Dad." "Ugly or not," I said, "we didn't start this. But we sure as hell will finish it." Ethan nodded slowly. "I know. It's just surreal. I still wake up some mornings expecting a message from Clarissa like nothing happened." "That's grief talking," I reminded him gently. "You didn't just lose a relationship, you lost what you believed it was." He looked out across the ranch. the fields glowing in soft evening light. "This land," he said quietly, "it was what they wanted, what they tried to take. But it's ours, Dad. Yours. And I swear, as long as I breathe, no one will ever get close to stealing it again." His voice had steel in it, steady, unwavering. And in that moment, I realized this battle wasn't just about land. It was about dignity, about truth, about preserving a family's legacy against people who thought they could rewrite it for their own gain. The days that followed were filled with preparations, testimony drafts, audio verifications, document reviews. Forensic analysts visited the ranch, asking questions and breaking down timelines. We met with Samuel twice more, and each time he reassured us the case was growing stronger. But the Davenports were fighting too. Their lawyers sent letters full of threats, accusations of defamation, emotional distress, invasion of privacy. Ethan read one of the letters aloud, then tossed it aside with a humorless laugh. "They're grasping at straws," but I saw the tension in his jaw. Late one night, we sat at the kitchen table, a single lamp illuminating the stack of papers before us. "Dad," Ethan said softly, "do you ever feel like maybe this is too big for us?" I reached out and gripped his hand firmly. "Son," I said, "the truth may tremble, but it never falls. We're standing on solid ground, even if they try to shake it." He swallowed hard, nodding. In that moment, I felt something shift between us. Not just father and son, but partners in a fight that went deeper than either of us had expected. A fight we had no intention of losing.